Hi there. I'm dashing this off as a quick response to a question that keeps coming up about House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones prequel series. Why should we watch this when we know how it ends? Why get invested in it? People who ask that aren't putting any thought into the question. That the amount of time it takes to type that in a comment section, I know how it ends. Take that same less than a minute and devote it to actually thinking through what you're asking. To cut through the bullshit, they're really asking, why should we watch this when Season 8 was so bad? It's people who rage quit Season 8 and then don't want to devote conscious thought to even analyzing what happened, which is very frustrating to all of us who are complaining about the showrunners who went off the rails years before Season 8. Where were you in Season 5 with the Sansa rape, TV Dorne, butchering Stannis? If you walked into Season 8 expecting the best season ever, you got what you deserved. But I'm saying this is you. The people who say that probably aren't going to watch a video that's more than 30 seconds long, so if you're listening to me now, you're probably not one of those people who rage quit like that. But this isn't a question of prequels in general or finished works in general. It's about Season 8. To quickly address those other ones, just to dismiss it, we know how it ends. That could be said of any prequel, and there are many successful prequels in major franchises. Look at Star Wars, not just with movies, but video games, cartoons, comics. Like there's, comics about the High Republic era, Jedi who lived 1,000 years ago. Just in general principle, we know that the Jedi Order will fall in Revenge of the Sith with Palpatine. But you still get invested in original characters developed for this prequel set 1,000 years ago. These specific prequel Jedi, will they have a happy ending? What will happen to them? How will this affect their world or politics in the entire galaxy on the scale of a couple generations? It's not about prequels in general. Then there's a question of it's adapting a finished work. How many other movies and TV shows are based on finished works? A book adaptation of something is a movie, or sometimes as TV shows. That I would be looking for a way to drive away that kind of hype fandom that is only watching so they can make up entertaining theories because no one knows the ending. That's like Twin Peaks Lost type stuff, where the theorization is an end unto itself. And yes, we theorize about things in the ongoing book series, but we're trying to figure out what is likely to happen. That when you have a hype fandom like that for a buzzworthy show, it turned into who can come up with the most entertaining theories, regardless of how plausible or likely they are to happen. That was a major problem in the later seasons, when they didn't even have to have comparisons to the books anymore. After Season 5, all those book fans over there, hooray, let's theorize that Bran is time-traveling and he's really the Night King, or Littlefinger's not really dead, that was a faceless man. That was thought-destroying, and I would kick it out physically if I could. I'm looking for a way to drive that away, drive it to extinction. We don't need that again. The empty, hollow, hype theorization. We want examinations of characters as in a book adaptation. Or for that matter, not just book adaptations, but like historical fiction about Henry VIII, like Natalie Dormer's Tudors show. Or The Crown on Netflix, which we know the factual events that happened in the history of the British royal family. It's a question of what Martin has repeatedly said, examining the human heart in contradiction with itself, in conflict with itself, that good people can do bad things, bad people can do good things, human beings are complicated, can have complicated reasons for the things that they do, or their regrets. That you can do all of that we know the major story beats of Henry VIII's life, but you're examining what he was feeling and those around him. Same in any finished book adaptation. Lord of the Rings, or I'm trying to think of something else. Lord of the Rings is a giant one. The Witcher series. You know the story beats of what happens, and it's trying to realize it as interpreted with an actor. And we don't, the whole idea of, oh, but I had so much fun when the show was surpassing the books. That wasn't fun, that was a nightmare. And I never want to have a situation where we can't generally predict what's going to happen again. And even then, it's for the main characters, for like the third tier amusing guard character. You don't know whether they're going to live or die. For many of the second and third tier people who aren't mentioned in the source material. But this isn't about all of that. It's about people who rage quit after season 8, and it's very frustrating that we're trying to tell them, are you saying that you think this was the book ending? I'm seeing people, and you've seen them, the type of person who's saying, I hate George R.R. Martin for the season 8 I hate the books, and you haven't even read the books. A lot of these people, and they just can't mentally separate that this diverged from the books. A lot of it has to do with propaganda, because HBO was hyping up the later seasons 6, 7, and 8 so much that, like, after the vaunted Battle of the Bastards, after season 6, the general audience hype fandom was basically trained to stop making book comparisons. Like, going into season 7, it was forget the books, we don't need the books, this is its own separate thing. And then it got bad, as we said, this is horrible. You can't philosophically change a book, and it's like a puzzle, and expect all the pieces to fit together like that. It'll result in something bad. You got what you deserved if you bought into that lie. That it's not so much a lie as just forget it. They were hyping the show so much that Maisie Williams is Arya, not an interpretation of Arya. There were no books. People were trained to stop thinking about the books in the last 3-4 seasons of the show. So it's no surprise, really, I shouldn't be that surprised, that they didn't even pause to think, is this the book ending or not? Is this some really weird version? As they've repeatedly said, House of the Dragon isn't a prequel to the Game of Thrones TV show by Benioff and Weiss. It is an adaptation of a prequel novel to the main A Song of Ice and Fire novels. And they're largely sidestepping the question of, is this a soft reboot of the canon or not, because as a prequel, they don't need to address that. They're trying not to alienate people. And a lot of good work went into, like, props and art and the music and everything. It's the writing that was bad. And yeah, I hope we eventually get a remake in our lifetimes. Not a remake, a better, more faithful adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire. Not with people running off to launch their movie careers with Star Wars. So, why should we watch this when we know how it ends? You're asking, I'd respect it more if you said the full thing. Why should we watch this when the Targaryens die out? Well, apparently Bran is king in the TV show, so as an institution, the Iron Throne was not destroyed. That makes no sense. And it's this terrible ending with Bran and Tyrion, well, maybe they'll skip ahead a couple of generations if they ever do a sequel thing. Probably not, because I don't think they're going to do sequels like that. The Jon Snow thing, that might be like a distant finale. I've talked about this. I don't know if they'll do something covering the politics again, but if you're upset that, it doesn't tie into the White Walker storyline, this isn't a supplement to the A Song of Ice and Fire White Walker storyline. It mentions it, sometimes it ties in because it's in the same universe. This is its own story unto itself. The Rhaenyra faction versus the Alicent faction in this Targaryen civil war. It stands on its own. So why should I get invested in this if I know how it ends? Cycling back there, if you think the TV show diverged from the books, this is our chance at a reset. And there are, people who are paying attention who say that if I'll never trust HBO again, this is just a prequel to the bad TV show. No, this is like when movie franchises get a reset. Case in point, the X-Men movies with First Class kind of got a reset. It was still the same continuity, but they did a prequel to reset everything, to get better writing in, and then later on would focus on let's wipe that away in Days of Future Past with canon questions. But if you're a book fan who's really upset about TV shows, I'd argue to come back, but that's not what we're dealing with. someone who's doing that would actually sit down and have a conversation with us. The problem is people who are not devoting more than 5 seconds to this, it's that they rage quit so much that their brain shuts down because it's upsetting that I don't want to talk about it. Okay, do you think this was the book ending or not? If it wasn't, then watch it because you don't know the ending. And what if it generally was somewhat like what the book ending is, that the specific point that, well, the Targaryens die out. Jon Snow is a Targaryen, and they're talking about a sequel project for him. Even if the Targaryens die out, they were the ruling family over all of Westeros for hundreds of years and affected its overall history. And this is a more basic thing that I don't know how people say this. When you go, oh, it's a prequel about the Targaryen Civil War, and they go, well, I'm not going to watch that. I like stories about the Starks and Lannisters. Most of the prequel stories are about the Targaryens because they were the ruling family, and they cast a wide shadow over everything. There are Starks and Lannisters in it because they're caught up in that history under them. That the Starks side with Rhaenyra, the Lannisters side with Alicent. So you go, oh, well, why do I care what happened to the Targaryens when they die out? Cregan Stark is a character in this, and the Starks don't die out. Joanna Lannister, they don't die out. But even more fundamentally than all this, it isn't about prequels in general or that it's a finished work. And there can still be a lot of theories due to the unreliable narrator stuff, due to things that Martin left deliberately ambiguous in the text that they have to figure out. It's not about that. It's not even about people putting any thought into, was this based on the books or not? It's purely rage quit after season 8. I hate this. Characters I liked died. They die out now, so what's the point if they don't continue on forever? Why would you, make a story in Lord of the Rings about, not the prequel to Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings itself is about the elves leaving Middle-earth forever. So why would you get invested in, not even Galadriel, in Legolas in Lord of the Rings, if at the end of the story, in the appendices, he leaves Middle-earth, that they don't have an ongoing future, that this isn't an expansive story, this is what TV Tropes calls the magic is ending. That this is a contraction, this is at the end of their history, structured like Lord of the Rings, where there wasn't really meant to be a sequel, but you could make thousands of years of prequels. Why get invested? I know how it ends. It's not even about that. It's about people who rage quit. And fine, you rage quit. Are you willing to actually start the behind-the-scenes discussion of what went wrong on the first series? This is upsetting to us because there's no accountability for the specific people who made the specific mistakes that allowed Season 8 to happen, who allowed Seasons 5 through 8 to happen. Instead of, wow, we should start investigating the craziness behind the scenes with Benioff and Weiss and Cogman and start going, this was never an attempt at making a good adaptation. We should build an argument for, a remake within the next 30 years. It's just, I sure hate Game of Thrones as a franchise. And it's difficult for us to comprehend, those of us who are criticizing it long before Season 8, that these are people who got sunk in deep. That imagine the shock of being invested in this for almost 8 years, or almost 8 years, that they came in a little late, by Season 3, so 6 to 8 years. And then walking into Season 8, truly expecting it to be a work of genius. I think they are legitimately traumatized. I mean, medically traumatized, because the rage quit thing of they're not even Googling what is this about. I don't have an answer to that. If you watch this, you're probably not one of them. My only hope is House of the Dragon being a good show by other people will start, simply by its mere existence, demonstrating that Benioff and Weiseros, their attempt at an adaptation as its own project or continuity, whatever you call it, is not synonymous with the print works of George R.R. Martin or other shows that are made by entirely different people that have very different takes on adapting the world of Westeros. Right now, it's just, I hate Benioff and Weiss's Season 8 and I feel betrayed. They're not putting conscious thought into this, and in many ways, there's nothing I can say in this is going to change that. This is just a pep talk for those of you who would listen. The only thing that will change that is the existence of House of the Dragon itself. Season 1 as a good show to show them, to demonstrate why weren't you asking these questions of separating a bad adaptation from the source material and who is responsible for this. The problem is that there's no accountability or responsibility when people rage quit. It's like, wow, that, well, there's more than one of them, that CEO of an entertainment company was really sexually abusing his secretaries. That's happened more than once, but I'm never gonna watch that show again because there was that bad person in charge, and I don't even like talking about what that person did. Well, then indirectly you're aiding the cult of silence. Or by that person did something so horrible I don't even want to talk about it. Then you're helping them silence it. I have never gotten that mentality of I'm so upset I'm not going to report on it. For people who are saying we know how it ends, just tell them, if you see that in a comment, say, you mean you know season 8 was a bad ending and you think this ties into season 8? I think there's going to be a reboot. Like, book fans were actually taking this a hell of a lot better than the TV-only hype fans, because we saw this as a branching off point to restart attempts at adapting the works of George R. R. Martin under different people. This is a reset. Will it be good on its own? I have no idea, but it's not building towards the Benioff and Weiss ending. It isn't a direct prequel to the... If they were making a prequel to their own TV show, that would be an issue, but it's entirely separate. It's adapting a different book Martin wrote. But generally, the people I see saying, why should I get invested in this? I know how it ends, are the same people when they watch the reaction videos to the full trailer saying, hey, what time period is this set in? And hey, who's making this? Are Benioff and Weiss back? And this has been filming for 2 years. You can Google the name of this project and see whether Benioff and Weiss are attached on the Wikipedia page or the IMDb writers page. Why did you turn your camera on to make a reaction video and you didn't think to Google for 2 minutes, 120 seconds, who is writing this? Are Benioff and Weiss attached? Of course, I don't think that, I said before, I don't think that's the fault of people making the reaction videos, but if that many people are asking basic questions like, what is the time setting, and are Benioff and Weiss involved, the news media has failed to keep you informed of this major franchise. They really dropped the ball because they themselves many of them are hype fans who rage quit themselves. And they don't want to watch it, so they don't feel like reporting on it to even investigate whether Benioff and Weiss are involved. So you see how it filters down like that when we have a news system based on people reporting who are fans themselves, and when they rage quit things, they don't give attempts at resurrecting franchises under different people a chance because they're really embittered about it. So that's a wider scale problem, and I said this was a short reaction. I recorded it audio only and unscripted, and I'm not editing it, this just took me 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours of scripting it, editing it, putting in slides. I'm not doing that. This is the short version. Why should we watch if we know how it ends? In the sense that you could Google when Game of Thrones began, we knew what the Red Wedding was, because it was in a book that had been published 15 years before, 13 years before. Book 3 had been out for over a decade. We knew what the Red Wedding was. When Robb Stark came on screen in Season 1, we were making inside jokes about the Red Wedding with Grey Wind. And you could have looked that up, but people still thought the Robb Stark storyline was really good. So I don't know. Point out, if you see this in the comments, point out Robb Stark or Renly dying, that these were generally book accurate, or Ned Stark dying. And, well, yeah, we knew how he died. It was already a printed book. You're talking about it was a terrible ending to this show, and That's bigger than me and bigger than my channel. Of they will have to address that question of is this in continuity with the other show? I just simply think they're going to do prequels for the next 10 to 15 years. And then maybe 15 years from now, start considering for another 5 years, maybe we should make a new attempt at readapting the main novels from scratch. Much as how the X-Men franchise did a soft reboot in Days of Future Past. That starting in First Class, it was kind of a soft reboot, then it was an outright canon reboot when they erased the timeline in Days of Future Past. If you were watching this for 20 minutes, you're probably not one of the people who just goes, we know how it ends, I'm not watching, then gives up. And again, this is separate from people who go, I'm not watching because I don't trust Hollywood to get the story right anymore, even if these are new people. That's a valid argument. Just, we know how it ends. Well, they'll have to be playing catch-up after Season 2 by binge-watching the early seasons. In many ways, this is parallel to how people weren't watching the first 2 or 3 seasons of Game of Thrones until after Season 3, The Red Wedding, made it a pop culture sensation. Even as late as like the break between seasons 2 and 3, I'd be going around, everyone was going around trying to, by word of mouth, tell people, watch this show, it's a really good drama, but it's a fantasy, and they dismiss it for being fantasy. That's not serious drama. We're in the same position again, where it's, why should I get invested in House of the Dragon? And it'll take a year or two. I'm really starting to think it'll be 2 years before we even get major audiences back onto this, and the only thing that can convince them is the continued quality and success of the show. There's really nothing we can say that if they're, because they're not willing to listen. That you can kind of argue some people down that no, Benioff and Weiss aren't involved, no, HBO has entirely new leadership, there's these good writers we like. Anyone we could have hooked in with these arguments we already have in the 2 years this has been filming. And if people are going to mock this, well, they're going to eat their words about 2 years from now. Of, wow, we were not listening. Not just that this was good, but, you know, since 2015, when you should have been blaming these crazy people at the helm of a major franchise with no oversight, we were handing them Emmy Awards, and then we're more willing to blame the source material to say, oh, Martin's not finishing the books, when we're complaining about finished books they abandoned. With the Sansa stuff, with everyone else. That was a major controversy, and that they can't distinguish between the bad show experience and that this was a horrible thing done to George R.R. Martin and his works. So, why get invested if we know how it ends? And it's the same people who say that go, and I don't know who Rhaenyra is. If you're not going to read the book, and you're not even going to Google her name to read the spoilers in the book wikis, why are you complaining about you know how it ends? You're talking about it's building up to the Targaryen thing. That's hundreds of years later. It's not affecting the lives of these specific characters. You will get invested in their stories because they're interesting characters. I fell in love with these characters when I read the first prequel novella about them in 2013. The Princess and the Queen came out 9 years ago as a separate part of the book canon. This was before the TV show even went off the rails. This was like during season 3 that came out, Princess and the Queen. This is a separate adaptation of a different prequel era that existed as its own novellas and the book Fire and Blood. So time and continued good quality on House of the Dragon will have to eventually bring people back, and beyond that, on a scale of years, will it lead them to questioning, wow, I never really distinguished that this was the fault of specific people. I just rage quit and didn't even want to talk about it, which is enabling the silence. So you should watch because the story of Rhaenyra and Alicent and Daemon is interesting.